A half-century ago, for 13 days in the fall of 1962, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. In our Sunday morning cover story, national security correspondent David Martin looks back at those 13 days in October.
On October 14, a recon plane returns with the first hard photographic evidence indicating the presence of Soviet offensive missiles in Cuba.
The picture that launched the Cuban Missile Crisis, taken by a U-2 spy plane flying at 60,000 feet on October 14, 1962. Shown to President Kennedy 2 days later by CIA officers.
There's a medium-range ballistic missile launch site and 2 military encampments.
That briefing and other critical meetings during the 13-day crisis were secretly recorded and preserved for history. When the president saw that U-2 photo, he had the same question you and I would have.
It's ready to be fired.
Faced with the prospect of nuclear-tipped missiles that could strike targets up and down the east coast of the U.S., many of the president's top military and civilian advisors wanted to launch airstrikes on the missile sites and follow up with an invasion of Cuba.
We're going to move all the available forces that we have to be in a position to carry out this invasion as quickly as we possibly can. So, we may have the war by the next 24 hours. All I want to say is...
The president even prepared a speech announcing the attack. You can see it at the National Archives, where curator Stacy Bredhoff has assembled a 50-year anniversary exhibit.
So the first line of this speech would have gone, "This morning, I reluctantly ordered the armed forces to attack and destroy the nuclear buildup in Cuba." So I think these are the kinds of things that really bring home the fact of how close we actually came.
This government feels obliged to report this new crisis to you in fullest detail.
The speech he did give stopped short of declaring war, but not by much.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union.
Before he started a chain reaction that could lead to all-out nuclear war, the president needed better pictures of those missile sites, the kind that could only be taken by low-level reconnaissance flights. So on October 23rd, 6 Navy jets, one of them piloted by Lieutenant Gerald Coffey, took off from Key West, Florida, on an operation codenamed Blue Moon.
Flew across the Straits of Florida about 50 feet, actually, and when you pull up, the exhaust from the jet would make a big rooster tail in the water. You're that low.
Soviet officials from Nikita Khrushchev on down were denying there were any missile sites in Cuba. But Coffey could look down from his cockpit and see them with the naked eye.
Was it clear to you at that moment that these really were missile sites?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you feel like it was a gotcha moment?
Yeah, we did, because we knew that Khrushchev had been denying all that time that there were any Soviet missiles in Cuba, and it was very gratifying to say, the hell they're not. You know, we just flew over them.
The Blue Moon pictures Coffey's squadron took that day were shown to the president 24 hours later. The day after that, Adlai Stevenson, America's ambassador to the United Nations, showed them to the world and demanded an explanation from the Soviet ambassador.
You will have your answer in due course.
I'm prepared to wait for my answer until hell freezes over, if that's your decision.
That same day, the 25th of October, Coffey was once again screaming over Cuba at treetop level.
Unarmed, unescorted,
But fast and low.
but unafraid?
I wouldn't say unafraid necessarily, but the excitement of doing something, knowing it was going to be really important, I think overcame any sense of fear.
What he found on that mission was a game changer.
I'm going across the missile site, and I kind of glance off to the left, and I see what looks like a motor pool. And it's half covered by camouflage netting and so on, and just a bunch of vehicles that I couldn't really identify individually as what they were. But it looked important, so I wrapped the airplane off to the side and pulled real hard to make that sharp turn to the left.
The cameras captured short-range Frog missiles that could fire nuclear warheads against American soldiers and Marines hitting the beach in Cuba. 120,000 troops were gathering in Florida. But CIA Director John McCone told the president those short-range missiles were, quote, evil stuff that dramatically changed the odds for an invasion. So an invasion, whether or not it succeeded in taking out the missiles, really could have been a disaster.
Yeah, it could have sparked a nuclear confrontation.
They used the nuclear weapons first against the invading force.
And then the United States would have had to retaliate somehow.
And there you go.
Yeah.
Armageddon.
Yeah.
With U.S. warships blockading Cuba, the crisis reached its peak on October 27th, known to historians as Black Saturday. Some of the missiles were now ready to fire. And in the middle of another of the almost non-stop meetings at the White House, the Secretary of Defense received an alarming report.
The U-2 was shot down. The U shot down. Pilot killed. Pilot's body is in the plane. Well, this is much of an escalation by then, isn't it? They fired the first shot.
You know, you can just hear the tension in their voices. It's different from the earlier recordings.
It is. Yeah, you can really hear the pressure building. And I think you do get a sense of, even while these discussions are going on, the clock is ticking, time ticks away on us, as the president says, because those missile sites are getting closer and closer to being operational.
Hanging over it all was a critical unknown. Where were the nuclear warheads that would go on top of the missiles?
We need to know where these warheads are. We have not yet found any probable storage of warheads.
That mystery remained secret for more than 4 decades until historian Michael Dobbs found thousands of unpublished photos taken by the Blue Moon pilots.
They've been just sitting in the National Archives waiting for a researcher to come and look at them.
And there it was, in black and white.
Well, the most important photographs that I found were probably of what proved to be the main nuclear storage bunker for nuclear warheads on the island of Cuba at a place called Bejucal, which is a few miles south of Havana.
How powerful were these warheads?
Approximately 60 times the power of the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
So one warhead basically would have taken out Washington.
Exactly.
The photos showed the vans the Soviets used to transport the warheads to their firing positions.
So I'd actually talked to one of the Soviet officers who was responsible for preparing the missile, and he told me that at the height of the crisis on Black Saturday, they were ready to fire within 2.5 hours.
But the very next day, Khrushchev announced he would withdraw the missiles in return for a promise the U.S. would never invade Cuba. His words to his military are on display at the archives. Remove them as quickly as possible before something terrible happens. In the days after the crisis, President Kennedy visited the Blue Moon Squadron, personally congratulating each of the pilots. 4 years later, Coffee was shot down over North Vietnam, spending 7 years as a POW. He's 78 now, but you can still see the young Navy lieutenant who took what historian Dobbs calls the photographs that prevented World War III. The guys that flew these missions are all a bunch of 20-somethings and 30-somethings.
Right.
The boys of October.
The boys of October, yeah, you could say that.